I learned the terrifying truth: why you should never leave your tent at night. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, my stomach dropped. It was supposed to be a fun camping trip with friends, but the air grew heavy with dread. I was just grabbing my flashlight, nothing more. Yet something felt off. The darkness stretched beyond my tent, a thick curtain swallowing the trees and ground. I could smell the damp earth and pine needles, mixed with an unsettling chill that sent shivers down my spine. Every sound seemed to echo, whispers that floated through the chilly night. The wind carried out what sounded like murmurings, almost as if the trees themselves were conspiring. My heart raced as I stepped out, the cold biting at my skin. Shadows danced around me, twisting and turning, like dark spirits lurking just beyond my sight. As I fumbled to turn on my flashlight, the beam flickered, casting more chaos into the darkness. I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Was someone watching? The leaves rustled, and something shifted among the trees. I turned, the flashlight shaking in my hands. A low growl rumbled through the air, sending a wave of terror crashing over me. I felt trapped, like the forest was closing in. I willed myself to breathe, to ignore the rising panic. But then I heard a soft thud, and something moved. My blood ran cold. A figure loomed just out of reach, barely visible in the shadows. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its eyes piercing through the dark, locking onto mine. My pulse raced, pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, wanted to run back to the safety of my tent. But my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot. And just as I summoned the courage to flee, the figure stepped closer, the darkness swallowing my scream. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The air thickened around me, clutching at my throat like a vice. The figure remained a dark silhouette, swathed in shadow. I barely dared to breathe, every nerve screaming for me to flee, but my body betrayed me, every muscle frozen in place. Then came the voicey whisper that resonated not just in my ears but deep in my bones. Stay, don't go. It was soft, wet, as though the words were soaked in something vile. I shuddered, my mind racing. Had it come from the figure? Or was it the forest, some ancient entity seeking to claim me? Suddenly, the flashlight flickered again, the beam sputtering like a dying candle. I felt a fierce wave of desperation. This was no longer just a silly dare in the woods. This was a nightmare, and I was its unwilling participant. My heart thudded, echoing the primal instinct to escape, yet I stood rooted like a deer caught in headlights. The figure moved closer still, and the growl intensified, resonating in my skull like a haunting melody. My instincts flared, urging me to run, but the darkness around me felt alive, shifting and seething with malicious intent. It seemed to pulse, as if the very trees were conspiring against me. My fear turned into a tangible thing, wrapping around me like an icy shroud. With sudden clarity, I twisted my flashlight, convincing myself it would be the beacon to safety. But light cast shadows, and what should have illuminated the path instead revealed the grotesque shapes that hugged the periphery of my vision. I squinted, and the darkness faded enough to expose figures lurking beyond the trees. More than one. Their forms twisted and contorted as if they thrived on anguish, each silhouette dripping malevolence. That I heard low, malicious laughter cackles that echoed off the trees, a sinister chorus that sent shards of ice down my spine. The whispers began to morph into a cacophony, a return of those suffocating voices urging me to join them, to stay in the eternal night. The weight of their yearning pressed against my chest. It felt as if the voices themselves were unraveling, tearing at the fabric of reality. Panicking, I finally tore my gaze away from the encroaching silhouettes and bolted back to the tent. Adrenaline fueled my legs, propelling me forward, but the moment I reached for the fabric of the tent, it felt warped and alien, as if the very ground shifted beneath me. The laughter grew louder, almost mocking. It was the sound of something relieved, as if taking delight in my misery. As I pulled at the zipper, the tent resisted, glued shut by some unseen force. I could hear my friends murmuring inside, unaware, blissfully ignorant of the danger that lurked just beyond the thin barrier. I couldn't believe they weren't awake. I pounded at the fabric, desperation clawing at my throat. Guys, wake up. My voice was a hoarse whisper, the fear making it tremble, but an unseen tide whisked it away into the blackness. I turned away from the tent, and in that brief moment, a scream twisted the night, a high, shrill cry that sent heat rushing through my veins. It was one of my friends. I couldn't see who, but the tone was unmistakable, a mixture of terror and pain, echoing off the trees. I whipped around, torn. It was too late for me. I knew it. The darkness had claimed them, but I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something. I whipped my flashlight back around, searching for their faces, desperate to find them. And then, in the corner of the light, I saw it fringed by shadows, a hollowed mass of eyes, glistening like pools of ink, flashing back at me with insatiable hunger. Then, just as suddenly, they retreated and I was left standing before a doorway, one I had never noticed before, an old, decaying archway in the trees, inviting yet foreboding, darkness spilling from its depths. It called to me with a voice louder than all the laughter combined, promising answers, truths I could not fathom. My heart told me to run, but my feet stepped forward, entranced by the beckoning void. With every step toward the archway, everything around me dimmed further, the laughter morphing into pleading whimpers, blending with the cries of my friends. I stood at the precipice, breath hitching, caught between dread and a longing to understand what lay beyond, and then the shadows surged forward, and I heard my name weaving through the air like a sinister mantra, growing louder until it morphed into a horrendous shriek. Everything froze, and in that moment, I was paralyzed by the immense weight of the unknown. Before I could retreat, claws grasped at my ankles, dragging me toward the archway. I was going in. There was no escaping the truth, no escaping the night. As I vanished into the abyss, a chilling thought struck me. What if the nightmare I dreaded was not just what waited inside, but what I had already left behind? The darkness engulfed me, swallowing every shred of light as I crossed the threshold of the archway. A fetid stench hit me like an unseen fist, a blend of decaying foliage and something far more putrid, as if the very air I breathed was tainted with the agony of lost souls. I blinked wildly, trying to adjust, but the abyss wrapped around me, blurring my sight. Though obscured by shadow, I felt movement. The air around me seemed to stir with a malicious sentience. I could hear the whispering, an unintelligible hum growing louder, coiling tighter around my mind. It was a chorus of grief and horror, the anguished echoes of those who had traversed this treacherous path before me, their suffering woven into the very fabric of this cursed place. That I stumbled forward, my pulse pounding in my ears, desperate for escape. The ground shifted beneath me, spongy and unstable, as if it bore witness to the crushing desperation that thrummed through the air. Had my friends followed me in? Were they lost alongside me in this wretched realm where time ceased to exist? And then I saw them, ghostly figures materializing from the shadows ahead. Their faces were shrouded in an eerie pallor, eyes wide with horror yet devoid of life, nothing but empty voids reflecting my own terror. They reached out towards me, their fingers elongated and skeletal, begging and warning in a rhythmic dance of despair. I recognized them, friends, twisted and contorted beyond recognition. Help! I gasped, but no sound came out, only the keening wind that swept through the dark expanse like a haunting. The air crackled, and suddenly I felt a presence hovering just out of sight, brushing against my consciousness like the cold fringes of a far-off storm. It was elusive yet insistent, thrumming beneath my skin and resonating with the palpable fear that smothered me. Was it the very essence of this forsaken place, a creature born of darkness that fed on dread? I turned to flee but stumbled back. The archway had vanished. In its place, only the dense shadow swallowed any hope of refuge, and I was ensnared in the nightmare's belly, enveloped in a smothering darkness. Echoes of their voices filled the air, distorted and grotesque. You shouldn't have come here. You should have stayed. Panic surged through my veins like wildfire, igniting the instinct to escape. I pushed against the shadow-clad walls, feeling the chill seep deeper into my bones, until I felt something pulse, faint but undeniable. It was like a heartbeat, thrumming with a rhythm both familiar and alien. Curiosity intermingled with fear, and I found my feet moving once more, guiding me toward the source. As I drew nearer, I caught sight of a glowing outline in the shadows. A figure stood before me, swaying slightly, its form flickering like a candle caught in a draught. The glow pulsed softly, illuminating a face that, despite being coated in the dark, carved an all-too-familiar visage into my memory. It was him, Troy, but something was wrong. His eyes were wide and glassy, reflecting shadows that danced feverishly around him, their visceral forms writhing like snakes. He seemed to blink slowly, a mechanical motion devoid of life. "Help us," he rasped, his voice a hollow echo, as if struggling against the weight of the void surrounding him. What the hell happened? Troy. Panic filled my voice as I rushed closer, yet an invisible force pushed back, as though the shadows were safeguarding their secrets. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, grazing my skin like cold fingers, stinging with a sharp anguish that stole my breath. "Stay away!" he cried, his voice reverberating with an urgency that pierced through the clouds of sorrow. It wants you. Get out while you still can." My heart seized as I processed his warning. The inescapable feeling of being observed deepened, and an oppressive weight bore down on me. The shadows surged like a tide, dragging at my limbs, whispering vile promises of secrecy, murmuring truths that had been held at bay. Before I could think of running, Troy stretched forth a hand, a desperate plea mingled with a reality I didn't want to accept. I hesitated, torn between reaching for him and preserving my fragile sense of self. But just as I moved to grasp his hand, I felt a sharp pull at my ankle, a cold, clammy grip that yanked me backward. My body twisted, fighting against the encroaching shadows, but they were too strong. I whirled around to find dozens of those ghastly figures, rising from the darkness like an awakening nightmare, their chorus merging into a deafening chant. "Join us forever, join us," with one last scream for help echoing through my lips. The darkness swallowed me whole, dragging me deeper into its depths as the light of Troy flickered out of sight. As I succumbed to the void's embrace, a chilling truth crystallized in my mind. What I thought was an end was merely a prelude, a haunting reminder that the darkness hungered for my essence, and I was about to learn just how deep that hunger ran. The cold gnawed at my skin, a biting chill that seeped into my bones like a serpent coiling around its prey. It whispered cruel promises, every breath drew out the darkness lurking just beyond the veil of my vision. I blinked, uncertain if my eyes remained open or if I had truly succumbed to the consuming blackness. Then it came, an echo, haunting and familiar. A voice that was not Troy's but resonated with the same desperate undertone. "Bree, help us, don't let it take you." The wordless howling surrounding me intensified, morphing into a sinister laughter that seemed to lick at the edges of reason. The haunt of their grief was a malevolent symphony, urging me closer to the abyss. That I staggered backward, my breath quickening as the ground gave way beneath my feet. The earth felt alive, writhing like a wounded beast, crumbling into unseen depths. I fought to plant my feet firmly, to gain some semblance of stability in this shattering world. But the shadows were insistent, wrapping around my ankles like snakes, pulling me toward something terrible that lurked just beyond perception. "Get out. You don't belong here." A chorus erupted, voices mingling into a frenzied jumble, each note sharp and jagged, clawing at my sanity. They seemed both a warning and an invitation, like moths drawn to a flame, and I was losing my grip on reality. "Please, I need to find my friends," I cried out, words swallowed whole by the tormenting resonance that vibrated through the stagnant air. Just as despair began to settle, I caught a glimpse of movement at the periphery of that oppressive gloom. Shapes began to materialize, the familiar yet grotesque forms of my friends, their features twisted with anguish, eyes wide as if eternally caught between worlds. "Bree, One of them screamed, a figure I could barely recognize, yet I felt instinctively tethered to them. "You shouldn't have come here. The woods are alive, there's something in the dark." But the darkness had gripped me tighter, shadows swirling with a mind of their own, dragging me away from them. I fought, every muscle straining against the inexorable pull, but it felt futile. Each screaming face blurred in my vision, morphing into grotesque masks of despair. Then came the laughter again, an eerie, raucous sound that felt like icy fingers dancing down my spine. "They're fools to fight. Embrace it. Join us." The shadows thickened, vibrating with this sinister affection. I felt an inexplicable urge to listen. A promise lingered in the air, shimmering with the allure of understanding, yet shrouded in the aftermath of torment. Suddenly, a figure rushed past me, electric with urgency. Shay. Her eyes, usually filled with mischievous spark, were lifeless hollows, echoing the warnings of my friend's message. "Don't believe them. Bree, you have to remember." Her voice trembled with urgency, pulling against the tide. As she reached for me, a shadow bloomed from behind her, a writhing mass of limbs and eyes, every gaze hungry. "You will rue the day you left your tent." It shrieked, a cacophony of death wrapped in flesh and memory. My heart raced, the instinct to run battling against the morbid curiosity to learn the truth swirling between them. "Shay!" I screamed, terror clawing at my throat, freezing as I grasped for her. But the darkness surged, an unforgiving wave, consuming her scream and dragging her back into the maw of despair. The dread of loss gnawed deeper, grounding me in that pivotal moment, the agony of knowing I could be next. Suddenly, I felt it seize my heart, an unrelenting pressure that made it struggle to beat against the weight of impending doom. "You're part of it now," the chorus sang, the words resounding and felt more than heard. I resisted, closing my eyes tighter against the oppression, but a deep resonating scream tore itself free of my throat, a primal cry that shattered the night's stillness. As I opened my eyes, I felt the air shift. Amorphous forms coiled and undulated, the figures of my friends blurring into a single collective consciousness of pain. A singular truth blossomed within me, a revelation, a darkness that transcended my understanding, and then I saw Ida gaze, dead yet achingly aware. Something from within the shadows, shifting closer. It flickered in and out, the embodiment of every unutterable fear. Instinct took over, propelling me the other way. But I could feel it now, pulsing with the rhythm of my own heartbeat. It was alive. And it was hungry. I turned to flee, but every direction was a darkened pathway twisting into endless shadows. My throat constricted as a clawing sensation webbed across my mind. In my panic, I had lost track of my friends, lost my hold on my sanity. The whispers surged, climbing the walls of my psyche. "Join us," it beckoned, silky soft yet laced with venom. I dared a glance over my shoulder, eyes wide, breath frozen. But what I saw made my heart drop into my stomach, the ground beneath me trembling in response. The void still loomed, but there was something more, a figure emerging from the depths, a silhouette cloaked in the remnants of light. A ghostly visage that locked eyes with me, intensifying the screams, making the air thick with dark promises, and before I could run, it spoke, its voice harsh and echoing, "You shall learn the truth, child, why none should stray from the warmth of their fire at night." As the laughter crescendoed around me, a blinding light burst forth, shocking my senses back to the reality I had fled from. But all too quickly, darkness enveloped me again as the pull sharpened, drawing me closer to the heart of that terrible secret. Clumps of foliage clawed at my feet as I stumbled through the darkness. The sensation of life in that desolate forest was unnerving, as if the trees watched me with needle-fine eyes, observing my every misstep. My breath came in desperate gasps, splattering the cold air with clouds of desperation. The further I moved from the gleaming light of my friends, the tighter the noose of dread entwined around my throat. "Bree, join us," the voices continued to chant, with a tempo that synchronized with my frantic heartbeat. It was like a hymn of the forsaken, and I could not shake the feeling that somewhere in that harmony lay my friends, perhaps liberated from their grief, but at a dreadfully steep cost. Every crack of a twig underfoot echoed in my ears like a gunshot, synchronously drawing unwanted attention from the shadows. My instinct screamed, urging me to run, to retreat to safety, to find the tent that had borne witness to our laughter only hours prior. Yet the darkness exerted its force upon me, a magnetic pull of sinister delight that kept me rooted, ensnared. I looked back, hoping to see a familiar face, but all that greeted me was a swirling chaos of shadows, writhing as if the forest itself was coming alive. Panic surged anew as I recalled the melting visage of Shay, her eyes pleading, swallowed by an entity I could scarcely comprehend. "Help us!" came a distant, echoing sob. "Bree, help us!" The wail struck with the power of 1,000 screams, igniting within me a fierce urge that teetered on the edge of reason. But there was another lure. It was the seductive whisper of unexplainable knowledge beckoning me with tantalizing promise of unlocking mysteries far beyond my understanding. The duality left me teetering, caught in a murky abyss of horror and temptation. "Focus," I muttered through gritted teeth, forcing my shaking legs onward as I struggled to overcome the fear that paralyzed my mind. If there was a way to save them, I had to find the source of this madness. They are still here. They can't be gone. But the darkness thickened further into a consuming fog, lapping at my senses. In the haze, nightmares unfurled, figures from my past, blended memories of laughter twisted into wails, gliding seamlessly into one another. Each visage sprang forth with a grotesque sense of urgency, as if their tortured forms were eternally trapped in a cycle of despair, longing to escape by pulling me into their realm of anguish. "Bree, it's so cold," a young woman's voice echoed, one I had not heard in years, belonging to a friend who had vanished while hiking a treacherous trail. "You're so close, come with us." She reached out as ethereal tendrils of shadow reached toward me, but instead of warmth, I felt an icy grip on my heart. The ground trembled beneath me, threatening to crack wide open, and I abruptly turned, my instincts kicking in as I raced deeper into the labyrinth of shadows. Hushed whispers slipped in and out of focus, enticing me to yield, while others groaned with despair, each pulling at my sanity as I felt the teetering balance of hope sway violently. I finally burst into a small clearing, the moonlight spilling like molten silver across the terrain, illuminating twisted forms that writhed upon the soil, specters clad in the ragged remnants of heavy woods. Their faces bore the marks of torment, but I sensed a flicker of recognition, their expressions tinged with longing. "No! No!" I shrieked, a raw plea clawing its way through my throat as I saw their gnarled fingers reach toward me, hungry for freedom delivered by the Reaper of Shadows. My friend's spirits, drifting dangerously into the embrace of the darkness that sought my very soul. "Bree," they crooned in unison, a haunting lullaby that threatened to unwound the edges of my reality. "Do not fear the truth, we only want you to understand." Panic surged anew as I felt the ground beneath me tremble again, cracking like a thin sheet of ice underfoot. I staggered backward, excitement swirling with that familiar dread. A realization trickled into awareness. Perhaps the darkness wasn't the predator I feared. Everything around me shimmered and flickered like a faulty film reel, and in the heart of that chaotic interval, visions materialized, each layered over another. A man in the thrall of wreckage, guilt etching his features. An old couple fading amidst the smoke of fire. Without warning, a woman emerged from the dance of shadows, her vacant gaze an echo of unassailable pain. "You must face it, Bree, you must awaken to the abyss." In an instant, memories rushed back, each moment, each smile shared with friends, now distorted as if refracted through a prism of sorrow. With every fan of space between us, other truths bled through the smearing darkness, a warning laced with visceral fear. I understood then what awaited each one who ventured too deep, those whose laughter had echoed out into the wilderness and never returned. My heart raced, searching frantically for an escape from this web of fear, but before I could make sense of it all, the oppressive weight of that shadow loomed closer, its chilling laugh vibrating through me like cold steel. "The truth can taste like sorrow or salvation," it sneered, and just then, the atmosphere shifted, the very air electrified as limbs reached out toward me, impossibly long and grasping. "Choose, child. The night demands a sacrifice," and just then, with one final earth-shattering rip, the ground split, revealing a yawning chasm of unending darkness. The whispering horde surged toward me, the cries of my friends becoming a cacophony that echoed through the very fabric of my being. Terror-stricken, I teetered on the brink where light met darkness, the chilling laughter spurning me forward into the unknown. Then, as the shadows plunged forth toward me, a new figure emerged from the depths, a silhouette that struck terrifying familiarity within, draped in shadows draping like shrouds. "Bree. I'm here." A voice screamed, almost drowned in the chaos around us. And my heart dropped as I locked eyes with the very specter of Troy, his form flickering with desperation. "Don't let go, don't let go." The darkness roared, swallowing his voice whole, and in that moment, I realized, what choice would I make? Embrace the darkness or the frail light of hope that flickered between us? Each option promised a different fate, and as I hung there at the edge of oblivion, the scream that fused with my own pulsed through the night, throbbing with the weight of all our unfulfilled dreams. "Bree. Don't." The last word eclipsed into dead silence as the ground beneath me gave way completely, and without warning, I plummeted into the yawning chasm, the grip of fear enveloping me like an everlasting night. I fell through that infinite darkness, the sounds of the night becoming a distant echo, replaced by a silence so profound it seemed to swallow my consciousness whole. Time lost its meaning as I tumbled down, my heart pounding in concert with the void surrounding me. It felt as if I had traded one nightmare for another, plunging straight into the core of fear itself. Suddenly, the ground beneath me reappeared, flat and solid, and I landed with a heavy thud, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. I pushed myself upright, the darkness still thick as fog, but now tinged with an oppressive heaviness. Struggling to regain my bearings, I scanned my surroundings, only to find the contours of a twisted landscape looming before me. Strange trees, their gnarled branches resembling skeletal hands that clawed toward the blood-red sky. The ground was slick with a viscous substance that glistened like oil, and the air smelled like charred ash and something inherently wrong. "Bree." A whisper floated through the air, coiling around my mind like a serpent. It wasn't Troy, but rather a sinister warmth reminiscent of the very shadow that plunged me into this realm. "Welcome." A shiver coursed through me as I instinctively took a step back, my foot slipping on the oily surface. The whisper turned into a cackle, a sound so chilling it resided between laughter and agony, reverberating against the grotesque bark of the trees. Everyone I had ever known, friends, family, seemed trapped somewhere within the brambled depths, their cries filtering through the darkness like lost voices adrift at sea. "Help us, Bree." It was Shay's voice again, distorted and dragged through a veil of despair. I looked around wildly, hoping to catch a glimpse of her before the other voices surged forward, drowning her out. "You can free us, free us," echoed echoing specters, a haunting chorus that rippled like a breeze. The shadows danced around me, a vague outline of human forms who were lost and wandering, their faces mere blurs of grief and longing. The spectral realm pulsed with the undertones of despair, wrapping me in chains made of darkness. I turned in circles, searching for a way back, or for Troy, but nowhere did the landscape offer any form of salvation. It felt like I was trapped in a grotesque play, forever reliving a scene enshrined in anguish. And then, as if to mock my despair, a smirk emerged from the darkness. An inky figure stepped forward from the void, eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. "Did you think the shadows were meant to imprison you?" "No, child," the figure crooned, its voice smooth yet dripping with malice. "You are far too precious. You've come here to offer your soul, haven't you?" The words hit me like a fist to the gut, and my mind raced to recall the essence of my friends. Their laughter, their warmth, and the echo of their spirits vibrated against the walls of my heart. I felt the weight of their trust, the unspoken "it is up to you, don't leave us" pressing down on me urgently, and yet, the dark figure loomed larger. "They await you," it hissed, gesturing towards something just beyond my reach. I followed its twisted finger, and my blood ran cold. There, suspended between twisted roots and gnarled branches, were the flickering forms of Troy and the rest, suspended like marionettes in a nightly performance of dread. "No!" I cried out, but it was too late, my voice severed against the dark laughter that answered me. The figure drew closer, reshaping its presence into someone else entirely, an amorphous blend of my fears, the specter of Troy drifting through its midst. "Join me, Bree. We can become one, pulling their souls from oblivion. You'll belong." The temptation seeped through my pores, urging me forward with promises of power and understanding, ending the torment for those I cared for, while sealing my own fate as keeper of the shadows. They must have felt it too, the spirits, because their ghostly faces contorted with desperation, pleading for me, yet I knew their freedom might cost more than I was willing to pay. Do it, Bree, the figure whispered, cradling a fractured piece of my heart, luring me like a moth to a flame. Embrace the darkness. Why suffer alone when you can save them? Just take my hand. He took an involuntary step forward, the pleas of my friends morphing into wails that clawed at my sanity. The torment in their eyes ignited a fierce determination, a rebellion against the consuming abyss. I wrestled with myself, anguish mixing with courage, and just as I whirled toward the skeletal trees seeking a way to pull them back, I felt the shadows lurch toward me, eager, insatiable. Bree. The voice of Troy rose above the chaos. Dante Fissure erupted in the ground, sending shimmering waves of the twisted landscape quaking. Before I could react, the darkness surged, consuming the light that existed between us, reaching for my heart with an icy grip. I struggled against its pull, gasping for air as I took in their desperate faces, stretched through the veil of shadows that seemed to grasp us all tighter, and then, like a brick wall collapsing, the world flipped. The safety of the forest, the fleeting warmth of the campfire flickered behind me, and the threads of reality unraveled as I teetered on the brink. With a horrible clarity, I understood that the shadows sought to feast not just on my friends but on my very essence. That I knew I would either plunge into the darkness that churned savagely around me or fight through the seething tempest of desperation to save them all. With unyielding resolve, I tore myself away from the shadow's grip and reached out, the air crackling with unspent energy. Hold on. I'll find you. I cried, the sacrificial weight of truth crashing beneath me. As its form continued to collapse around me, I could feel the darkness gathering its strength for one final strike. And just as I reached for that shimmering glimmer of hope, something sharp stabbed into my side. A betrayal as I felt another shadow pierce into the fray. The darkness screeched, splitting worlds apart, and I was violently jerked back into the raw throbbing embrace of oblivion. In that gripping moment, I realized my choice was made, irrevocably intertwined with everything fleeting. My body would succumb, but my spirit would not let go without a fight. Yet the shattering chill of despair clawed around my spirit like ice, tightening with every heartbeat, until all at once everything went black, and the cacophony of night shrieked my name, then silence. Waking felt like breaking the surface of a treacherous sea, gasping for breath beneath the weight of an unseen tide. I lay on a cold, hard surface, the sound of my heart pounding echoing loud in my ears. The darkness surrounded me again, deeper than before, pressing in on all sides. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled upright, looking frantic in every direction, feeling the remnants of my fear wrapped tightly around my chest, but this was different. Gone was the twisted landscape littered with spectral forms. In its place, I found myself in an eerily pristine tent, the walls a stark white, contrasting sharply with the oppressive weight of the looming night outside. My breath came quickly, this familiar feeling, the direct assault of wrongness pushing down on my shoulders. Was I tucked safely back in my tent? The flickering shadows danced across the fabric like restless souls. It felt too clean, too pristine for comfort, casting me into a paradox of serenity amidst the looming dread that weighed heavily in the air. Bree. The whisper was gentle, haunting. It slid through the thin fabric like a breeze, a familiar voice. I hesitated, my heart racing again, every instinct tearing at me to flee, to forget. But I had to know. I had to face it this time. Shay. I called out, my voice trembling. Silence answered, the kind that felt like a rope tightening. Then the fabric of the tent bulged inwards, stretching like breathing flesh, pressing against me as heavy footsteps approached the entrance. My breath caught in my throat, instinct urged me to hide. But there was nowhere to go. Bree, help me, came the voice again, clearer this time. It was her, but distorted, like it was being pulled through a twisted corridor of sound. You have to believe. You have to come back. Before I could comprehend the depth of her words, the tent flap whipped aside, and I was greeted by a sight that froze the marrow in my bones. Looming at the entrance was a Baina figure swathed in flowing darkness, the edges of its form flickering uncontrollably, as if stitched together from shadows themselves. And in the swirling abyss of its face, I could make out fleeting reflections of familiar faces, each shifting with an expression of anguish that rippled across the darkness. The figure turned its eyes towards me, deep pits of hovering non-light where something akin to rage and despair smoldered. "Join us, Bree," it commanded, the voice now layered densely, echoing with my friend's cries, my own name thrumming through the air. "Come play in the darkness where you truly belong," instinct screamed in my veins as I staggered back, stumbling over my own feet. "No! You're not real!" I shouted, yet the words felt vacant. The shadows shifted, crushing against the tense walls, urging the darkness further inside, beckoning with promises of power, of belonging. "Bree," the creature hissed, its surrounding presence vibrating with a pulse that mirrored the very essence of the night. "Do you not feel the pull? The connection? They are here for you." And in that heartbeat of deafening silence, I suddenly felt the me friends, their essence, their spirits tangled with the darkness. A myriad of conflicting emotions surged through me. "Help us, Bree! Don't abandon us!" They cried out in unison, their voices a shivering lilt threaded with despair. I was a moth drawn toward the inferno, and for a fleeting second, I felt the allure of their pleas claw at my sanity. But deep within me, a flicker ignited a force birthed of love, defiance, and the memory of shared laughter. "Get away!" I shouted, thrusting my hand forward. I could almost feel an invisible barrier forming, an energy surging as I willed it into existence, sickened by the raw pain contorting their faces. I concentrated on the borders of that shared memory, that profound bond. "I won't let you take them." But the darkness recoiled, a chilling surprise evident in its form, almost faltering, like a beast caught off guard. It writhed. A midnight tempest collected in a human shape, tangling itself around me, reluctant to let go. I felt the ground shudder beneath me, air crackled unsteadily with pressure, then, with a suddenness that struck like lightning, the tent surged outward, and I was thrown back against the hard surface as the darkness struck back with a pulsing roar. My heart raced, pounding frantically as I fought against the oppressive shadows reeling around me, coiling with a palpable hunger. "Join us!" it commanded with a voice so twisted it echoed through my very bones, resonating with a chilling promise. "You will not leave like they did. You will become one with us." In that moment of raw desperation, the tent began to ripple like a storm at sea, shattering the stillness. I saw glimpses of my friends, picture frames of joyful memories tearing apart as they merged back into the consuming void. I felt them reaching for me, their forms slipping through the fingers of existence like sand. "Bree!" Shay's voice became a distant wail. "Say goodbye," chimed the figure, its darkness surging, reaching all around me, and I was suddenly staring not into the endlessness of life, but an abyss that promised infinity dominated by shadows. Every thought clawed at my soul as I clasped onto the memories, the laughter, the challenges, the love. But as the whispers climaxed in a spinning crescendo, the darkness lurched forward, teeth glistening at the edges, hungry, waiting, and I was left to confront my own reckoning. And just as the very fabric of reality seemed to tear itself apart, a blinding light erupted at the tendrils' edges, exploding outward and throwing me into blinding white, the threatening shadows slashing at the edges of my vision. "Don't forget us!" echoed a final cry, as I was hurled into the clamoring nothingness, the pulse of panic thrumming against my heart, and in that instant everything ceased. The suffocating night faded. But as blackness reclaimed its hold, I knew within my depths, the nightmare was far from over. Because in that terrible silence, I heard the whispers again, and they were far too close for comfort. The darkness hummed, a familiar discord that buzzed through the emptiness surrounding me. My heart ached with uneven beats. The sudden silence, like a scream caught in the throat, pressed heavily against my chest. Where was I? Disoriented, I sat up slowly, the ground beneath my hands solid yet eerily cold. The tendrils of shadows had receded, but the air remained thick, swirling with a hum that tickled the back of my neck. Believing it was the remnants of my nightmares, I closed my eyes, hoping the waking world would unfold into something less disconcerting. "Bree!" the whisper slipped from the fabric of reality, soft yet chilling, as though the shadows themselves had crept back to ignite the embers of fear inside me. "Shay?" I murmured weakly, clenching my fists, battling back the uncertainty. A chilling breeze swept through the air, and I felt a caress that sent prickles of fear cascading across my skin. I opened my eyes and tried to blink away the darkness creeping in from the periphery, but it clung to me up like thick fog rolling in from the sea, smothering any glimmers of clarity I desperately sought. With all the dread of a disobedient child, I stood, legs feeling like fragile twigs beneath me, shaky and uncertain. That voice. It held a promise, yet barked a warning. Gripping my arms tightly, I stepped forward through the palpable darkness, and my heart quaked. The breath of the night bore an unsettling resonance, seeming to thump in tandem with my pulse. I felt the walls of the tent dissolve, the pristine white fabric melting into an unending landscape of murky shadows that twisted and turned as if it held 1,000 secrets in each undulate. The ground beneath me morphed. I stumbled forward, grasping at wisps of terror that wrapped around my limbs. The darkness began to drain away, but only to reveal a hollow, ominous expanse lined with shapes stirred by anxious whispers that curled with my breath. A flicker caught my eye. In the tumult, a figure appeared, a hazy silhouette just a few yards away. My heart hammered as I realized it was the familiar outline of Shay. Relief surged through me like icy water, sending goosebumps cascading across my skin. "Shay!" I cried, running towards the figure. But each step felt like I was wading through molasses, the air thickening with each desperate push. "Where are you?" She turned, and as the shadows shifted, an anguished face surfaced, a mask of sorrow wrapped tightly in confusion. "Bree, you shouldn't have come back." There suddenly, without warning, Shay's figure flickered and wavered, unraveling like smoke caught in a gust. Panic coursed through me as if a blade had pierced deep within. "No! Shay!" But the mere sound clung to me, swallowed by the void that consumed her. "Join us!" The voice chanted from the depths, an echo reverberating from a multitude of hidden souls. Their pleas twisted into laughter, filling the cracks with madness. "Please!" My voice echoed back in haunted whispers. "Help me!" But instead of Shay, darkness spilled forth, unfurling into shapes of the lost, faces of friends I once cherished, now twisted by despair and yearning. Their features blurred in agony, melding with shadows threatening to engulf everything. "Don't leave us, Bree," they murmured, their voices a cacophony of grief, each syllable cutting deeper than any knife. They hovered just beyond my reach, enveloped by the nocturnal mist, oscillating between distance and closeness, each flickering pulse at odds with their desperate cries, "Don't abandon us." The chorus of despair clawed at my sanity, filling the air with a dark urgency. I stepped back, instinctively pulling away, panic threatening to spill over. Suddenly, the warmth of a familiar touch brushed against my palm, a lingering whisper of hope. I turned, heart racing, to spot a shard of light breaking through the engulfing shadows just a few feet away. It pulsed, beckoning me, while the cries from the darkness grew frantic, the shadows reaching as if in desperate need to reclaim what they had lost. "Bree." A familiar voice pierced through, the fabric of reality taut. "Around me. Come. This way." As I sprinted toward the light, the mingled echoes of lost souls surged around me like a tempest, chilling my very bones. Though the warmth of the light clung to my fingertips, the darkness clawed at my ankles, dragging me back into the cold void from which I had just emerged. "Bree." The pleading turned to frantic screams, the voices of those I'd lost became distorted, fighting against one another, their tones melding into a shriek that rattled my very core. And as I lunged for the light, the last shred of hope, the shadows erupted with a fury, coiling around me, enveloping every inch of my body in their suffocating grip. I felt myself torn between the sobs of friends calling for me and the clutches of nightmare stretching out, threatening to take everything, and as the chilling darkness surged forward, wrapping tighter around me, I glimpsed through the shadows, revealing not just despair, but something far worse lurking behind, a reflection of my own visage, twisted and distorted, smiling back with a malevolence I could never have expected. "Join us," it rasped, a taunting echo rippling through the dark, and then the ground beneath my feet crumbled away, pulling me into an abyss I had no way of fighting, as the excruciating laughter drummed in my ears, drowning out my pleas. Before I slipped into the emptiness, I could only grasp the fleeting notion that this nightmare was only just beginning. I fell through the seemingly endless void, my body weightless, as if it were tethered to a nightmare rather than reality. The echoes of laughter circled me like vultures, each sinister cackle amplifying my sense of helplessness. I had no anchor, I was adrift in an ocean of shadows, surrounded by unfathomable horrors that slithered at the edges of my consciousness. Moments or maybe years passed, and the disjointed reality finally coalesced as I landed with a bone-jarring thump onto an uneven surface. The ground, rough with jagged stones, dug into my skin, awakening a sharp pain in my hands and knees. Wincing, I looked around, my breath stolen away as recognition flickered in my mind. I was back in the clearing, but it was transformed. Gone were the familiar stars, replaced by a swirling vortex of darkness swirling in on itself like a black hole. Glimmering shards of silver light flickered within, each one a cruel reminder of the joys I'd lost. Everything felt wrong, even the very air was saturated with a rancid stench, like decay mingling with something acrid and sinister. The trees surrounding the clearing twisted grotesquely, their bark peeling away to reveal glimmering veins of something alive and pulsing. Their branches reached down, gnarled fingers clawing at the sky, and I could swear I heard whispers emanating from the very roots burrowing deep below. With a shudder, I stumbled to my feet, breathing hard, desperately searching for an escape. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Just beyond the clearing, the shadows danced, writhing like serpents in the wind. I squinted, leaning forward. There was something similar standing among the inky blackness. A woman with features both familiar and distorted, her form shimmered as if she were made of the very shadows that surrounded her. "Bree," she said, her voice soft yet tinged with malice. "We've been waiting for you. Who are you?" I croaked, stepping back instinctively. The hairs on my neck prickled in warning. "Don't you recognize your old friend?" A grin stretched across the woman's face, but it was wrong, too wide, too filled with sharp teeth. A shudder ran down my spine as I strained to connect the dots. "I thought I might show you what's truly importante, all of you." As the woman's form wavered, it morphed into a swirl of faces, friends, acquaintances, even strangers from fleeting moments. They moved in and out of the shadows, their mouths forming silent screams, each one a reflection of despair and yearning. "No!" I gasped, backing away, but the faces turned to me, their eyes hollow yet pleading. "What do you want? Join us," they chanted together, voices layered in haunting harmony, resonating with sorrow that wrapped around me like chains. The very air vibrated with their desperation that I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing my mind to push through the haze of terror. "I won't join you," I shouted against the rising chorus, but my defiance only fueled the dark energy gathering around me like a tempest. "Do you think you can escape the truths that bind you?" The woman's voice boomed now, echoing through the twisting shadows. "You brought this upon yourself." A sudden bright light pierced through the whirlpool of darkness, a sliver of hope, illuminating a path ahead of me. The shadows recoiled as I instinctively chased it, adrenaline surging through my veins. As I sprinted, the chaos of voices transformed into anguished screams, each word cutting at my resolve. "Bree, stay with us. You don't understand." I reached the edge of light and the air crackled around me, infusing me with warmth that almost felt comforting in contrast to the suffocating chill from behind. Desperately, I glanced over my shoulder. The shadows twisted as if forming monstrous shapes intent on pulling me back into their depths. Suddenly, a figure lunged from the onyx moss, a swirling tendril of darkness shaped like a claw reached for me. I felt the cold grip close around my ankle, yanking me backward with unyielding force. I cried out, flaying wildly, but the shadows were stronger, breathing life into every fear I had ever known. In a moment of frantic desperation, I pushed with everything I had, surrounding myself in the warm glow and hoping it would protect me. But the momentary safety shattered as I felt the pull intensify, my body bending against the violent tug, a cacophony of screams echoing around me, crescendoing to a deafening roar. "Bree." Shay's voice shot through the tumult, an agonized plea cutting through the darkness. I spun, desperation igniting my will. Fight it, but before I could respond, the shadows pulled me down into their endless grasp, the light flickering like a dying candle as the abyss threatened to swallow me whole. My body twisted in an unnatural, bone-chilling way that I couldn't control. In that swirling black void, a vision manifested, a terrible flash of the past, of horrific laughter echoing within the tent, the faces of my friends twisting into something grotesque, shedding their humanity. And before I could process, a piercing gaze locked onto mine, me reflection, warped and sinister, beckoning me forth with a twisted grin, and just before my existence collided with the depths of despair, the true horror lay bare before me, a revelation that shattered all reason. "Welcome home, Bree," the voices echoed, entwined with my own, as I was pulled into the depths of the terrifying truth. Then everything went dark. The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes again was the sheer, suffocating silence that overwhelmed my senses. The darkness felt thicker this time, wrapping around me like a shroud, its weight more oppressive than before. The oppressive heaviness pressed down on my chest, forcing each breath to draw in the stale, pungent air that clung to my skin with a rancid odor of decay. I tried to push myself up, panic flooding through me as the images of my friends, their faces distorted with fear, flickered like moths circling a flame in the back of my mind. My heart raced furiously in my chest, desperately searching for a pulse of hope amid this nightmare. I had to find them, I had to break free from the shadows that conspicuously lingered at the edges of my consciousness. "Bree." The whisper brushed against my ear, rhythmic and enticing amid the hush, making my skin prickle. Familiar, yet chilling. "Come back to us, you don't have to be alone. Shay." I croaked, every word felt like sandpaper against my throat. I stared into the deep void surrounding me for answers. Before I could think, the shadows melted away, imparting an ancient light that wavered around the edges. Momentarily blinded, I flinched at the blinding brightness enveloping me. As my vision adjusted, I was greeted not by the grotesque figures of my friends but by a landscape glistening with sun-kissed grass, a campfire crackling under a cloudless sky. "Is this real?" I wondered aloud, a chill crawling up my spine as I basked in the unfamiliar warmth, every sense igniting with dire uncertainty. I felt charged, yet wariness tugged at my gut. The once comforting ambience felt tainted, as if hidden beneath a thin veneer of tranquility something far more sinister lurked in the shadows just out of sight. A low fog rolled into the edges of my vision, darkening the lush fields, and a creeping dread gnawed at my heart as memories flooded back, the laughter of friends, sweet promises of adventure twisting into a macabre dance within the lost echoes of our time beneath the stars. "Join us," the whisper returned, coiling around me like a serpent, the timbre insidious and hypnotic. "You can't escape what you truly are." Confusion swirled as I stumbled forward, the shimmering peace disintegrating before my eyes. Shadows swirled, piercing the sunlight, tainting the serene landscape where laughter had once bloomed. I focused harder, close to digging deeply within myself, unraveling all that had been locked tight. "Let them go." I screamed, and the chorus of shadowy figures emerged from the dense mist that cloaked the area, swirling like malevolent smoke. Their gnarled faces merged and morphed, taunting me with echoes of my friends' desperation. "You chose this," they hissed in unison, voices layered in a ghastly harmony as if they were a single living entity. "You are one of us now. All that remains is your acceptance." "No!" I cried out, the echo of my voice cutting through the spectral fog, but even as I resisted, the undeniable grip of despair settled onto my shoulders. I turned to flee, panic wrapping tighter around my heart, but the landscape twisted around me, blocking every escape as every face melded into a mask of sorrow desperately reaching for me. "You wanted the truth," the shadows coalesced, an entity stepping forth from the darkness, its gait eerie and graceful. "You wanted to save your friends. But you must understand you can't save them. You tainted the bond of your souls when you chose to leave your tent." Memories spiraled, images of our laughter, shadows lurking in the distance as we gathered, not fully grasping the weight of the darkness we had trespassed into. Each joyous moment melded with glimpses of despair, and in that fleeting moment, each fragment sharpened and struck, I glimmered with realization, a realization that left my blood running cold. That it was always you, I gasped, dawning horror clawing at the back of my mind, pieces of the terrible truth snapping together. "I'm the one they wanted." "Yes," the entity replied, its voice tinged with cruel satisfaction, a glee that bore the weight of centuries. "You were chosen from the beginning, a vessel of light stepping into our world uninvited. And the more you sought to fight against it, the deeper you bound yourself to our fate. Your friends' spirits fell into our wanting embrace because they followed you into darkness because you led them." "No. I was trying to save them," I screamed, grappling with the horrifying reality, shuddering as it consumed me whole. "I never meant for this to happen." "Nor did they," it mocked softly, shadows congealing around me, keeping me tethered while the boundary of my mind fractured. "But it does not matter now. All that remains is the inevitability to join us, to fully embrace the abyss and become something more." A pulse rippled outward like a wave breaking across the shore, and with each heartbeat, I felt the collective sorrow of my friends enveloping me, pulling me deeper into the pull of the abyss. I staggered back, breath hitching in my throat. The faces of those I loved swarmed around me, calling, pleading for me to let go for their freedom, for my own. "Join us." The whisper echoed sweetly around me, torn together like a thread on the loom of fate. "You belong with us now, Bree. We are not gone, we simply reside in this realm. Choose this life, and we live forever untouched by fear." Caught between the wretched cries of their lost souls and the resounding darkness that pulsed with hungry severity, I stood frozen, fractured within the hollowness, inching toward the precipice where flesh meets shadow. But the abyss wasn't just an ending, it was also a beginning. As I stared into the void, I realized the truth lingered still. Not everything would be lost. I could harness the connection I held, use it to bend the depths of shadow back into something pure. "No." I raged against the pulse echoing around me. I refused to be a vessel for despair. In that instant, a spark ignited, and I felt warmth surging through the icy grip of the void. I focused on my friends anew, every moment shared, every laugh that hid beneath the terror. Those echoes burgeoned to life, filling the abyss with a blinding light that shattered the darkness and burst forth with torrential force. "In the name of love," I bellowed, clenched fists glowing fiercely, casting away the shadows that had clung to me for so long. "I am not yours." "No." The entity cried, its form shattering into countless fragments, torn by the raw power of my unwavering will. I drew forth, breathing all the light I amassed. Did they instinctively feel my freedom entwined through that love? Each friend's echo joined the symphony of light surging with me and crashed against the shadows. Flashes of their faces flickered brightly, momentarily breaking through the clutches of the void, illuminating the pathway I wove toward salvation. In those fleeting, vibrant moments, I fought against the temptation to join, against the haunting whispers echoing, "Bree, stay with us, don't leave." "No." I countered, clarity cutting through the facade of darkness. "I won't abandon you. I will bring you back." With that final rally, darkness buckled. Whispering shadows erupted like a thunderous storm, and I felt the boundaries dissolving around me. With every step forward, I took the hands of my fading friends, pulling them toward a light mayhaps flickering in the distance. We broke free, propelled by love and sincerity as the void shattered behind, and yet, as light surged through meth-shattering fragments of darkness peeled apart, revealing something far more insidious that lurked within. It had not abated, it watched with insatiable hunger, its gaze burning into my soul while it prepared. As we crossed the threshold of light, a haunting realization ripped through the disintegrating echoes of laughter. Not all darkness was extinguished, and the shadows, though fragmented, were only planning their revenge subtly, lurking in the recesses of the mind waiting patiently to reclaim their prize. That chilling truth echoed on repeat, a reminder that darkness is never truly vanquished. It merely waits, always waits.